Let's just slow things down for a minute. I want you to take a deep breath, settle in, and really get comfortable. Because in this explainer, we're going to dive into something incredibly profound. We're going to unpack a feeling that almost all of us experience, but, we rarely know how to actually talk about. We're exploring the unique, really quiet isolation of our modern lives. To do this, we're going to rely entirely on the brilliant work of sociologist Zygmunt Bauman, specifically his fascinating framework of liquid modernity. Our goal today? To finally understand why, in an age where we are constantly connected to everyone, our social worlds can still feel so incredibly hollow.
I want you to really let this question sit with you for a second. Have you ever felt entirely alone while standing right in the middle of your own friend group? It's this visceral, almost melancholic paradox, isn't it? Like, you might be out at a crowded restaurant or maybe at a loud concert with people you literally call your best friends. Everyone around you is laughing, taking photos, having a great time. And yet, this quiet anxiety just sort of washes over you. A real emptiness. It's that sinking feeling that despite being hyper-connected, you are fundamentally solitary. If you have ever felt this way, I want to validate that for you right now. You aren't imagining it, and it's definitely not just you.
So, let's dive into Bauman's framework, because the first thing you need to know is that this feeling of isolation, it is not a personal failure. You aren't broken. Instead, Bauman argues that this is actually a systemic condition of what he calls our deeply individualized society. Think about it. We are constantly seeking shelter. We're looking for a tribe, a family, a true community to belong to. But the catch is, we are trying to build that shelter in a world that fundamentally demands we operate as isolated, competing individuals. We are structurally set up to be islands, Yet we desperately, deeply crave the mainland. To explain how we cope with this impossible tension, Bauman introduces this brilliant, almost cinematic metaphor. He calls it the cloakroom community. Picture this. Imagine you're arriving at a theater for a play. You walk in from the freezing cold outside, and you take off your heavy winter coat. Now that coat represents your daily anxieties, your political differences, your class struggles. And what do? You leave it at the cloakroom. You check it at the door. For the next 2 hours, you sit in the dark next to total strangers, and you're all laughing and crying at the exact same moments. You feel deeply united. But it's an illusion.
This whole theater metaphor is what builds into what Bauman calls carnival communities. Let's break down the anatomy of this kind of spectacle. First, we gather temporarily. We share this intense, hyper-focus on a specific event. Maybe it's a massive music festival, a viral internet fandom, or some niche hobby. And during this time together, we completely suppress our personal differences. We temporarily shed our heavy burdens, those coats we talked about, so we can perform a totally frictionless, synchronized social unity. And honestly, it feels amazing in the moment. But the reality is, it creates a very fragile illusion of lasting unity.
And this brings us to exactly why we do this. The sociologist Richard Sennett actually captured this perfectly. He said, images of communal solidarity are forged in order that men can avoid dealing with each other, a counterfeit of experience. Let's just pause and reflect on how heavy that is. This temporary harmony we feel, it's actually a defense mechanism. We engage in these cloakroom communities precisely because they help us avoid the really hard, messy, painful work of genuine empathy. They let us skip the hard work of negotiating real differences or resolving actual conflicts. Basically, we want the warm feeling of community, but without any of the heavy lifting. But, as we all know, inevitably, the spectacle ends. The lights come up. Whether it's the house lights coming on at the end of a concert, an internet trend totally fading out of the algorithm, or just the end of a Friday night out with people. The moment the event is over, that shared proximity just immediately dissolves. Pop. The magical, synchronized bubble is gone. You have to get up from your comfortable theater seat, face reality, and walk back out into the lobby.
Which brings us right back to the cloakroom. Because once that shared distraction is over, individuals have to reclaim their heavy coats. You have to put your daily anxieties, your insecurities, your bills, and your deep isolation right back on. As sociologist Ulrich Beck notes, and this is a stark way to put it, once the social norm fades, what emerges is the naked, frightened, aggressive ego in search of love and help. We disperse, totally scattering back into the atomic loneliness of the city streets. That community we felt an hour ago, it was never real. It was just a temporary truce with our own isolation.
So here is the absolutely crucial question we have to ask ourselves. Why did our human bonds become so incredibly fragile in the first place? Why are we practically forced to rely on these fleeting cloakroom communities instead of deep-rooted, enduring villages? To understand this, Bauman guides us to look at the historical and sociological root cause of it all. We really need to look at the massive shift in the very nature of our modern world.
And this right here is Bauman's central thesis. He argues that we have moved from what he calls solid modernity to liquid modernity. Think about the past. Solid modernity. Institutions were heavy, a factory job lasted a literal lifetime, marriages were absolute, and communities were deeply rooted in fixed physical spaces. But today, we live in liquid modernity. Everything flows. We have temporary ties, gig economy jobs, super light commitments. In a liquid world, power and survival actually depend on traveling light, remaining mobile, and flat out refusing to be tied down by heavy mutual obligations.
But there is a very dark side to all that fluidity, because in a liquid world, consumerism hasn't just stayed in the shopping mall, it has seeped entirely into our social lives. Human bonds are now treated exactly like consumer goods. We shop for relationships, we shop for friends, we shop for entire identities with the exact same expectation we have when we're buying a brand new phone. We expect instant, frictionless gratification, and the very second it stops working perfectly, we just toss it away.
Let's walk through this cycle, because it is exhausting, but it's exactly how we live now. Step 1. We adopt a new aesthetic, a subculture, or a lifestyle trend. Step 2. We consume all the required social and digital tokens. We buy the clothes, we learn the slang, we curate the social media posts, all just to prove we belong to this new group. But then comes Step 3. We discard the identity the very moment the gratification fades, or, more accurately, the moment it requires any actual painful commitment. We are just constantly assembling and abandoning these incredibly fragile identities.
Zygmunt Bauman summarizes this beautifully, but honestly tragically. He says, we stay in the race as long as we shop around. Whatever we do and whatever name we attach to our activity is a kind of shopping. Just think about how exhausting that really is. We are treating everything, even our deepest friendships, our own personal growth, our very souls as a protracted shopping spree. And the cruel trick of a shopping spree is that desires are meant to be constantly replaced. They are never, ever meant to be actually satisfied.
And the cost of this liquid mindset? It is massive. Because we treat relationships like consumer goods, we basically operate with this built-in assumption of temporariness. We just expect things to end. And because disengagement is so incredibly easy now, you can just block someone or mute them or ghost them entirely, we actually do it. Trivial disagreements become totally fatal to a friendship because we just refuse to invest the effort required to survive friction. We're trapped in this endless pursuit of instant gratification, and it creates this brutal, self-fulfilling prophecy of loneliness.
So, how do we protect ourselves from this terrifying fluidity? Well, we retreat. We retreat into what Bauman calls the community of similarity. And really, this is a purification ritual. We actively seek out identical people who look exactly like us, think like us, vote like us, just to surround ourselves with. We build these intense echo chambers. Why? Because it completely protects us from the terrifying prospect of true vulnerability. I mean, if everyone around you is exactly the same, you never actually have to negotiate differences. You never have to compromise. You're safe, but you're completely stagnant.
We've essentially traded a lost art for a really harsh modern reality. In the past, urban life required something called civility, and that meant wearing a public mask to protect others from your private burdens, which allowed diverse people to just share a city in peace. But today, we've replaced that entirely with confessional culture. We colonize public spaces, especially the internet, with our private miseries. We turn society into this giant projection screen of personal anxieties, and we bond only through shared trauma and public venting. But here's the truth. Trauma bonding with random strangers online, it doesn't build lasting civic foundations. It really just amplifies the noise. And through all of this relentless shifting, the pressure is placed entirely on you. As Ulrich Beck points out, the individual actually becomes the reproduction unit of the social. This is the crushing burden of what sociologists call individualization. In liquid modernity, every single success, every failure, and every quiet moment of loneliness is placed entirely on your own shoulders. You are forced to constantly invent, choose, and defend who you are, but with absolutely no overarching structure or deep community to catch you if you fall.
So we arrive at a real turning point here. If the modern world absolutely demands that we be individuals, and if those heavy, rooted communities of the past are truly gone for good, why do we burn so much of our precious energy performing for these empty, temporary cloakroom communities? Why do we exhaust ourselves trying so hard to fit into consumerist friend groups that are guaranteed to dissolve the very moment the lights come up?
The resolution Bauman points us toward is actually incredibly bold. Stop fighting the uncertainty. Instead, master the art of high-quality solitude. True autonomy isn't found in hiding within a temporary carnival. It's not found in adopting some new aesthetic just so you can fit in for a weekend. True freedom is found in facing the fluidity of this modern world with quiet confidence and learning to stand firmly, comfortably on your own 2 feet.
But slowly outline this path to genuine autonomy together because it's so important. First off, you have to stop chasing low-quality conformity. It is a game you literally cannot win. Second, accept the fluidity and the absolute unpredictability of modern life. It is simply the water we swim in now. Third, build your internal strength, rather than constantly relying on a fragile consensus of people who, honestly, are just as scared as you are. And finally, find profound, unshakable comfort in your own company. Reframe your feelings of isolation not as a curse, but as an incredible opportunity for genuine self-discovery.
To really anchor this final lesson, let's look at one last quote from Bauman. He wrote, "Whatever safety, democracy, and individuality may muster depends not on fighting the endemic contingency and uncertainty, but on recognizing it." That is so powerful. Freedom requires taking responsibility for ourselves. It requires us to look clearly at this liquid, ever-changing world and say, I see it for what it is, and I am going to navigate it without seeking impossible, illusory shelters.
Which brings us to our final thought. The spectacle, whatever it is, will always end. The carnival is always going to pack up and leave town. When you finally retrieve your heavy coat from that cloakroom and you walk out into the cold night alone, are you brave enough to simply be yourself? I really want to leave you sitting with that question to ponder. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, embrace the quiet and stay curious.